Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hope you're having a great day. It's been about a week since my race, and I've had that time to take off and kind of reflect on things. And, last week I spoke about my race and how I went, what I thought could have gone better. But I've taken this time this past week to kind of reflect on the entirety of my last training block, what went well, what can be improved upon. And today I thought I'd go through what I've learned from this last training block and kind of prepping for my next training block, which is going to end with the big race in Chicago. So with that all being said, let's get into it. Alright, so overall, my thoughts on the last training block is I think it went really well. I really want to use that training block as a way to build my base and really prepare for this next coming training block, preparing for Chicago. So I was used to running that high mileage and going long hours of training to prepare for ultimately being ready for the Chicago Marathon. Ultimately, I have 5 big main takeaways from this last training block of things that I can improve upon to be better prepared come the end of this training block in October. Those 5 takeaways are: I need to work on fueling while I run. I need to change my progression for my biking so it mimics more like what my running progression is like. I have to be better about my core and lifting and those small things. I thought CV was really helpful, and I'd like to implement some more of that, so the more critical velocity work. And I think it'd be helpful if I did a bit more racing or time trials this training block. So I thought I'd go through and break down each of these 5 points and how I'm going to go about it for my next training block. Okay, so the first point is really simple, and it's just that I want to work on fueling while I run. I know that's going to be a really important factor when I run the marathon. I kind of came to this realization when I was doing my 70-minute marathon pace run. And I felt really good during it. It felt comfortable, but the ultimate issue was by the end of the run, I was starting to cramp up, and I realized, I was running low on fluids, electrolytes, and all that stuff. And so I really want to focus on being able to fuel while I run, because that's not ever really been something I've done. Occasionally I'll take like a sip of water or something. I've always been a runner who avoids consuming anything while they run, usually because it just doesn't sit well with my stomach. So for this next training block, I really want to try and work on that, and I'm probably going to do that by trying to fuel during workouts and during my long runs to keep myself going during those times. And that's kind of going to be the practice I'm going to do to prepare, because come Chicago, I want to be able to fuel during the race and not have it upset my stomach. So I really want to get my body and my stomach used to taking in those simple fuels while running. The second point is a big one for me, and that is my biking progression. So I'm gonna keep biking as a supplement to the running, like I did last training block. But last training block, my approach to biking was different than how I normally approach my running. And that was really because I started biking before I was starting to run. And I started off biking pretty much an hour, 6 days a week. And when I started running more and having those workouts, I kept that going. Maybe doing a 40-minute bike ride or something once in a while, but mostly it was hour rides. And I could feel that come mid-March, I was getting very tired. And so I started taking more days off biking, and then I kind of readjusted it, and I had like 30-minute rides, 40-minute rides, and I varied it more. And I think because of that, because of starting so high on the bike when I was starting the training block, I was more tired come the end of the training block. And I think I could be more fresh, more well prepared if I take it as I would my running. And I'll show you what I mean. This graph right here kind of shows what my training block, the last training block mileage progression was. And you kind of see it follows a somewhat of an arc. There are little dips from down weeks and stuff, but in general, it follows that, peak mileage and then that taper. And here's what my biking looked like. And you can kind of see, aside from the week where I was in Colorado and didn't bike, it was pretty much just a steady decline throughout the whole training block. And I really want to focus on kind of mimicking what I do with my running. So I'm gonna start this training block lighter on the biking and progress it higher as we go along, and then decrease as I taper. Hopefully, my goal is that I will feel more fresh, more well prepared, less tired from taking that approach, as opposed to just starting at an hour, 6 days a week, and trying to maintain that and ultimately falling off, because it's a lot. I mean, in the first month of the training block, I was doing 14-hour weeks sometimes, and when I was doing 100-mile weeks in the training block, they were 16-hour weeks, but there was that lull in between where I went from like 14 to 12 and back up. So ultimately, I'm looking to try and mimic my normal running progression, which is a increase in mileage and increase in intensity, and then the taper, obviously. So that's the next thing I want to work on. The third thing I want to work on is the small stuff. And I would say in the beginning of my training block, I was actually pretty good about doing that, whether it was core, SAM, leg lifts, all that kind of stuff. And I was generally pretty good at the beginning of the training block, which is usually how it works for me. And come the bulk of the training block, where I'm doing the high mileage, the intense workouts, and I'm really tired, I tend to falter on those and fall off and be less consistent with that, which is something I always want to try and improve upon. And I think part of that too was that the intensity of schoolwork and everything was getting there too. But now that I've graduated, and as of right now, I can really focus on my training, I really want to take that extra time to focus on doing those little things and trying to be as consistent as possible. Right now, my goal is to do 4 days a week where I have those small exercises, whether it's core, a leg lift, SAM, strength and mobility, or some combination of them all. And I'm hoping that adding all that extra stuff in is just going to help with a stronger base and less aches and pains as the training block progresses. Ultimately, I feel like when I'm really good with the SAM and the core and stuff, my hips feel stronger, my stride feels stronger, and ultimately I can run faster with less effort. And so I want to keep that going throughout this training block. So by the end of it, I still feel strong, and it's not like, oh, my hip is kind of hurting because I've been lacking in those exercises and all that. The fourth point I had was to do more critical velocity work. And now this is interesting because this is actually new to me. I didn't really start doing like what I'd call critical velocity work until this past training block, and it's a relatively new concept I learned about in the last year or two. Overall, I think it actually really helped. I think what I did in critical velocity, which was relatively minimal, I think I only had 3 full critical velocity workouts. I had other workouts where I put in some critical velocity work, but only like 3 workouts really focused on the critical velocity paces or system of running. I would like to do that more because I think it just made me feel strong, and come the end of my races, or my race in the 10K, I knew, okay, I can start going now. And I think a lot of that comes from the critical velocity work. Early on in the race, I told myself, and I felt like, okay, I can keep going. I have the stamina for this. And that came from my threshold, my marathon pace work. And at the end, at the very end, I felt like the critical velocity work I did was what kind of helped me with the last mile, 2 kilometers of the race. So ultimately, I'd like to probably do more critical velocity work. Obviously, this time around, I'm training for a marathon, not a 10K. So critical velocity is kind of like the speed end of things. My plan for the training block, and I can show right here, is to start the first couple weeks just building a base, right? And then obviously I'm going to introduce workouts. And the first workouts I'm introducing are going to be things like marathon pace tempo runs, hill workouts for strength, and then stuff like speed, which is pretty much anything critical velocity or faster. And the reason I'm doing that is because instead of waiting to the end of the training block to try and sharpen up and introduce more fast-paced work like critical velocity, VO2 max, mile pace, rep work, all that kind of stuff, I'm going to introduce that early on in the training block, and then during the bulk of the training block, I'm going to transition to kind of the bread and butter of what's going to be prepping for this marathon, which is threshold and tempo work. Then towards the end, when I'm starting to taper, I'm going to reintroduce a lot of that speed component stuff. And that way, when I reintroduce it, hopefully it's going to work that it's not as much of a shock to the system that I'm going from running, 450 to 520 pace, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now I'm going to be trying to run 440, 430, 420 pace. My body will hopefully recognize like, oh, I did this before, and it should work out that since it's reintroducing, my body's not going to take as much of a hit from that, and overall I won't be as tired come the end of my training block, and I'll be more well prepared. And that way, come the end of the race, hopefully I will feel strong and I can push through the wall that I've been told so many marathoners hit between miles 20 and 23. The goal is to try and avoid that wall as much as possible, and I'm hoping that the speed work is going to help with a bit of that. And finally, the last point I had was racing and time trials. And ultimately, the reason I want to do more of that is because I did do a 5K time trial 3 weeks before the 10K race. Obviously, I remember it didn't go well. I mean, I ran about as fast as in the 5K time trial as I did in my 10K race. I think having raced again recently, being the first race I've done in almost 2 years, a year and a half, I think having a couple more races, probably in this training block 3 or 4 total races, including the Chicago Marathon, would be helpful in preparing me for that race feeling again. I'm not sure exactly what races I'm gonna do. I obviously don't want to do too much racing, but I want to be prepared for that feeling again. Ultimately, I have a couple ideas of what races I want to do. I have not signed up for anything yet aside from the Chicago Marathon, but I do have some race lengths in mind. The first being actually is I want to try my hand at a triathlon. I plan to sign up for one sometime in July or August. I'm only probably going to do a sprint because I don't want to do an overkill, so it'll be about an hour-long race. But I've been biking a lot, and I feel like it could be a fun thing to do. I'm trying to change things up. It's different, and I think it would be cool to try and do it. Because I want to do a triathlon, I'm actually going to start introducing some swimming into my training. I'm not a particularly good swimmer when it comes to form. I would consider myself a strong swimmer. Like I'm fine swimming for a while, it's just that I'm not very efficient at it. I'm probably going to swim most likely like 2 times a week just to get used to it. Hopefully, come July or August, I can get into some sort of sprint triathlon just to test things out, have some fun. It's something different, and I think it'd be pretty cool. The other race I'm thinking of doing is I might try and do like a road 10K, even possibly a half marathon. I'm a bit hesitant to do a half marathon because it is that longer race, and I don't want to tire myself out too much before Chicago Marathon. I'm leaning more in the case of a 10K, ultimately because I plan on doing another 70 to potentially 75 or 80 minute marathon pace tempo run, which is going to be the length of a half marathon or more. And so I'm thinking I might try and race like a 10K, probably 3 weeks out, maybe 4 weeks, maybe even 5 weeks out from the Chicago Marathon, kind of as a race prep to get that feeling of racing again and hopefully get some good competition. But that is what I have for today, everyone. These are the 5 big takeaways I took from this last training block and I want to use in the next training block to help improve my fitness and performance. And I think if I can execute all 5 of these points well enough, I think things could go very well for this next training block, and I am very excited about it. Things are not set in stone right now. I'm only signed up for the Chicago race, nothing else, but I'm gonna look into some things. If I can't find anything, I can always do a time trial on my own, but I'm very excited for what's to come. And if you want to see more stuff about how I'm building my training plan, how I approach making workouts, building my calendar plan and everything, leave a thumbs up and comment down below, and I can do a more in-depth dive in the specifics of my training plan starting from June up until the Chicago Marathon in October. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. We just hit 100 subscribers, so that's awesome. I'm so excited, and I can't wait to see what comes next. So thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.